Hey everybody, welcome back. So, we're continuing our reading of the Federalist Papers. We're in Alexander Hamilton's essay, just basically going over defects of the current Confederation at that time period, and also insufficiencies thereof. Let's continue. The consequence, clearly, is that there can be no common measure of national wealth, and, of course, no general or stationary rule by which the ability of a state to pay taxes can be determined. So if you have all these broken up nations, right, and you have to take her in as when you look at GDP, you got agricultural land, you got different sectors that are contributing to the national wealth. Under a union, you can measure what's the true potential of trading with this partner, right, in the market. Here, it's like he's pointing out for us that if you're all these little separate ones, then it's hard to really measure your wealth. And then remember, if they want to get taxes from you, like he said, that's going to be difficult. And then how much protection will be for those groups to preserve them from not only internal strife, but external strife. You see what I'm saying? There's a lot to think about. The attempt, therefore, to regulate the contributions of the members of a confederacy by any such rule cannot fail to be productive of glaring inequality. So, glaring inequality and extreme oppression. So notice this. He argues that a confederacy is going to produce more inequality and more oppression. This inequality would itself be sufficient in America to work the eventual destruction of the Union. So notice this. The inequality that would stem from an insurrectionist types of Confederate aims would lead to the decay of the Union. He's mentioned that clearly before, but he's reiterating it in a different way here. If any mode of enforcing a compliance with its requisitions could be devised. Yes, and how do you enforce if they don't, right? How do you keep them doing it? Because they are sort of separate. They're these little separate entities who are little sovereign in unions, He has a point. The suffering states would not long consent to remain associated upon a principle which distributed the public burdens with so unequal a hand, and which was calculated to impoverish and oppress the citizens of some states. Okay, so public burdens, unequal hand. So just really being more oppressive on other parts than other parts, right? Impoverish and oppress. So remember, the inequality he mentioned was glaring, so he's reiterating it again. While those of others would scarcely be conscious of the small proportion of the weight they were required to sustain. So notice how these little Confederates are to make sure there's a sustainment there. And how will they do it if their contribution is so little, yet they would require such aims? So let's see where he goes. This, however, is an evil inseparable from the principle of quotas and requisitions. So evil is attached to quotas and requisitions in this context, right? There is no method of steering clear of this inconvenience but by authorizing the national government to raise its own revenues in its own way. Aha! So notice this state taxation versus federal taxation. And on your paychecks, you'll notice it. Imposts, excises, and, in general, all duties upon articles of consumption may be compared to a fluid, which will in time find its level with any means of paying them. Any means of paying them. The amount to be contributed by each citizen will in a degree be at his own option and can be regulated by an attention to his resources. Hopefully even a good tax system, they're gonna weigh your assets. You'll see what class of taxation you fit into. The rich may be extravagant, the poor can be frugal, and private oppression may always be avoided by a judicious selection of objects proper for such imposition. So, objects proper for such imposition. So, what would you're going to tax, and like what items, and that will be determined by the judicious selection, obviously. But, you know, that comes into the private business versus, you know, government interference on what a private business will charge. And then the taxes thereof, what is the point where you say, hey, you're crossing it. If inequality should arise in some states from duties on particular objects, these will in all probability be counterbalanced by proportional inequalities in other states from the duties on other objects. So the duties on other objects, obviously, like taxation, don't forget. In the course of time and things, an equilibrium, as far as it is attainable, in so complicated a subject. So notice this. He's admitting here, you know, you want the balance, and it may never be its perfect form, and it may never even be attainable, but you should try to aim. In the course of time and things, an equilibrium, as far as it is attainable in so complicated a subject, will be established everywhere, or, if inequalities should still exist, they would neither be so great in their degree, so uniform their operation, nor so odious in their appearance, as those which would necessarily spring from quotas upon any scale that can possibly be devised. That is a very fantastic statement right there. So few inequalities, right? Odious in appearance, just like when you see decay, like in Baltimore, they had some big garbage problem. New York, they're having a big rat problem, all the garbage. And it's like, it's odious, and it's horrible seeing how ineffective the Democrat politicians are failing to do their basic duties of sanitation, while they wear fancy suits and hang out and have expensive meals, while everyday citizens have to smell sour, stinky trash, and the elites get to be in their high buildings in the corner office, ignoring the plights of everyone else. Wow, yes. So, uniform in their operation. That is quite an interesting way to say it, right? Yeah. It is a signal advantage of taxes on articles of consumption that they contain in their own nature a security against excess. So, security against excess. That, I mean, the soda tax was a example where people would be like, what's the argument behind that? If you like tobacco taxes, and if you make something, you know, overly tax burdensome, it'll reduce its consumption. Others would argue, well, I'll tax food, you know, how much I want, and, you know, it'll increase the market, and then we can find a way to bounce back that taxes originally back to the, you know, distributor or whatever, or find some way to give some tax break in another way, and what you can claim in your deductions and all that. So there's a point, right? There's gonna be a way where they can navigate the sort of taxation maze, but it's interesting that he mentioned that. They prescribe their own limit, which cannot be exceeded without defeating the end proposed. That is, an extension of the revenue. When applied to this object, the saying is just as it was witty that in political arithmetic, 2 and 2 do not always make 4. Okay, there's some memes where people were like, math is racist. And then you could do like a Federalist meme where like there's political arithmetic, which is obviously, you know, tongue-in-cheek satire, yet nerdy political doublespeak in rhetoric and such. But it's a good one. If duties are too high, they lessen the consumption. Yeah, you know, but some benefit from that duty because it makes it more exotic, and someone can turn that as a marketing angle. You never know. But he does have a point, right? That's why, okay, good point would be, it's very expensive to make American-made products, and this has caused everybody to import cheap crap that is made in, you know, slave labor, and then to sell at more profit because, you know, the taxes are so high. California has some of the highest taxes, I think, in all the United States of America, yet has the highest rate of homelessness and so much corruption and so many gangs and so much poverty, and, you know, is propped up by Hollywood and Silicon Valley and Napa.